We are up to the fourth page in Megilah Daf Chaf Vav Amud Aleph. We'll start from the Mishnah at the bottom of the page. Chaf Heve Beis. Bnei Ha'ir. So now we're going to talk about the laws of the shul. Very interesting laws. So all the laws are found here actually in Masechta Megilah, except we do have a little bit in Masechta Bava Basra right in the beginning about selling a shul. So the general principle is that Meilin b'kodesh ve'ein meridin, that when it comes to kedusha, we always try to increase it, not to decrease it, like Basil told us by Chanukah. How do we know the concept of Meilin b'kodesh ve'ein meridin? In the Gemara Brachos, it actually says Gemiri, which sounds like it's a halacha of Moshe Sinai. But Rashi, in a few places in Shas, gives us different mekoros. And interesting is, in every place in Shas, Rashi gives us a different makor. So Masechta Shabbos, Rashi told us we learn out from the Lechem Apanim, which is that you started out, you put it on a silver table, and then from there went to a golden table. But here Rashi says we learn out from Moshe Rabbeinu. Betzalel built the Mishkan, but it was Moshe who actually had it standing, who made it upstanding. Moshe is a higher madrega, so there we learn out Meilin b'kodesh ve'ein meridin. Or from by Kairach, we took the frying pans and we used it to coat the mizbeach, so we went up in kedusha. Why Rashi keeps on changing in the pshat? The Acharayim talk about it. Anyway, so Mishnah. We're going to talk about levels of kedusha, and if you sell something, you can only use the money to buy something that is superior. The people in the city sold the street in the city. You remember about a tinus, they used to go outside in the street when it got very serious, and they would, daven in the street. So they sold that particular section of the street. Loikhin bedam of basic knesses. You purchase the money to step up, which is a shul. Now a shul is not really kodesh. A shul is more something like tashmishay mitzvahs. We'll see later. Beis HaKnesses, if you sold a shul, loikhin, we'll see later in the Gemara, how can you sell a shul? Loikhin teva, then you buy it to the table, which is the Aron Kodesh. The Beis Yosef adds also the bima that you push the Sefer Torah on. Teva, you sold the Aron Kodesh, loikhin mat peiches, then you buy the mantle of the Sefer Torah, which is much holier because it's actually covering the Sefer. Mat peiches, you sell the cover of the Sefer Torah, yikhu svarim, then you can buy svarim. Svarim in those days was well, we know what's Svarim today, but in those days they used to actually like a Torah scroll, but it was the visual Svarim. It was Nevi'im, Ksuvim, and so on. Now it seems that Nevi'im and Ksuvim are both the same level, even though for certain Gemaras it seems that they're not exactly the same. But generally, when it comes to kedusha, we treat them equally. Svarim loichin Torah. You can buy a Torah. Those you only go up. Avoli mochru Torah. If you sold a Torah, you cannot go down, so you cannot buy with the money svarim or svarim. If you sold svarim, you cannot buy with it mantles and mantle. You cannot buy. You sold them the mantle, you cannot buy an aron table. You sold the aron kodesh, you cannot buy a shul. Beis HaKnesses, you sold the shul, you should not buy the rechav. Same thing is if you have leftover money, you had money set aside to build a shul, and your leftover money you can only use it for equal or for higher things. Now, the big machlek is showing what about equal? Can you sell svarim to buy other svarim? In the big machlek, if you're allowed to, you're not allowed to. Balamoy and others over here, because is the main emphasis at Meilin b'kodesh that you have to continuously, progress, or is the main emphasis meridin that you don't go down? And in Shulchan Aruch, it actually brings both opinions in halacha, and therefore generally we try to buy only better things. Obviously, Sefer Torah, there's nothing higher, so you can only sell Sefer Torah to buy Sefer Torah. But the Taz says when it comes to Svarim, you are allowed to swap Svarim or sell Svarim to buy other Svarim, because as if l'chatchila, when you bought the Svarim, you thought, even though you didn't spell it out, that I'm going to have the Sefer as long as I need it. Once I don't need it anymore, if I find a Sefer that's more important to me, I can sell it. Says the Gemara, Bnei, the members of the city, Shemachru Chayv, they sold the Chayv in the city. This is the view. Our Mishnah is authored by Rav Nachman Bar Yosi. There is absolutely no kedusha in the street. Rav Nachman Bar Yosi said, therefore, this is totally irrelevant there. You can do whatever you want with the money. Rav Nachman Bar Yosi, my time, but what's the reason? Since they davened by fast days. Uve ma'amadas. Now, if you remember, ma'amadas are the 24 groups of Yisraelim that was corresponded to the 24 groups of Kohanim, because they represent the Klal Yisrael, because when you bring a carbon, the owners have to be there. So those people in Yerushalayim went to the Beis HaMikdash, the rest went to their local shul, and they would say we had every day a different shir that they would say. They would fast Monday to Thursday and so on. Now, these Mamodas were not actually in the street. They had their own shul. But occasionally, possibly, Rashi brings there that it could be that they were, occasionally, once every 6 months or something, they would go out and in the street. But Rabbanan say that doesn't make it Kodesh. Hahu Akrei Ba'alma was only, tzufelig. It only happened occasionally, or rare occasions. Okay, basic and if you sell a shul, you can buy a teva and Aron Kodesh. Now you could buy something superior. We're going to learn there's two kinds of shuls. There's a shul called a shul of kfarim, of the villages, and there's a shul of the metropolis, of the city. The definition of a shul of metropolis is that people come up from abroad, they daven there as well. So the shul is not limited only to the people who are the locals, the local denizens, but also to people from abroad. Now, the Achreim already say it doesn't mean tourists. Tourists don't count because they come and go. Talking about people who come abroad for business and they spend some time there. When they spend some time, they come to shul. Now, there are two opinions whether they actually is the pshat because they contributed money as well. So you people, the locals, can't make decisions because there are people from all over the world who contributed money as well and they have a share in it. Or even if they didn't contribute any money, the fact when we built the shul, we built it for the entire world. We need the entire world to agree, and therefore we can't do anything without them. So the Gemara says. I'm talking about all of this is talking about when can you sell a shul if it's a local shul that's only for the neighborhood, and even if you're living in metropolis, if you build a shul on your street because of convenience, so that shul wasn't built for the world, it was just built for the people there for convenience. Then again, it would not be considered krach, it would be considered kfar. It's interesting. Today you have shuls that are built for, let's say, for a certain group of people, this kind of chiddush shul, this kind of a yeshivish shul. What happens then? Because you've sort of limited the scope of the shul by saying this is this kind of a shul or that kind of a shul. Does that convert the shul into a kafarim rather than a krachim? They haven't talked about it because in those days the concept, I guess, didn't exist. But a shul from Krochin, people come from all the world, you can't just sell it to because you need the opinion and the consent of the entire world, which you'll never get. But it's not always correct. Ravashi says, even if it's a basic knesses shul krochin, if people from all over the world congregate in this shul because they want to see the rabbi of that shul, they're coming there for a particular individual, then that's as if they've all handed over their rights to this individual that they can administer, they can do whatever they want with that shul. This shul here in the city of Mechasia, I forgot the Malmosa, people come from all over far and wide. Even the Daiti Dikos, they all come because of me. I can then sell it. Big Machlekes in the Poskim, is it limited only to someone like Rav Ashi's caliber who was a Gadol B'Yisrael? And therefore, and the Gemara says in Gittin, he was one of the only people that Torah Gedula Makam Echad. He was a Gadol B'Yisrael, he was wealthy, so he had all the possible attractions that might attract people to come to see him. So only that kind of person has that right to sell the shul. But if you have, let's say, just an ordinary Rav or an ordinary person, they don't, even though people are coming to see them. Or anybody, if there's a public figure there and people are coming because that public figure, even though they're not in the caliber of Ashi, they're treated as if they're the owner of the shul and they can't sell it. So it's not so clear. Megilah asked a question. So you, Rav Shmuel, want to say that a shul of krochin you cannot sell, only kfar. So I ask a question. Rabbi Yehuda said, there was a story with a shul made up of people who refine copper. There was in Shalayim, they sold it to Rabbi Lezer. Actually, it should be Rabbi Lozer. Rabbi Lezer was not a rich man. It was Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah, who we learned a number of times, extremely wealthy person. You give 10,000 sheep for mice per annum. When Rav Chavav Amaral in the middle of the page, we're talking about whether you can sell a shul, you can't sell a shul, and we're saying that you can sell a shul from a village, but you cannot sell a shul. And with the money is holy. You can only buy something that's even superior in kedusha to that. In other words, the money itself remains holy. The shul obviously remains holy, and so on. And we'll soon see talk about that as well. If the money actually remains holy and the shul remains holy. But if it's a major shul that people from far and wide come and travel there, then you cannot sell it. So anyway, so in Shalayim, they sold the shul to Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah, and he treated it as if it was his own, did whatever he wanted. Now the question is, over there, it was a shul it was in Shalim, so it was a major shul for attraction of the whole world, and yet he was able to sell. You just said a minute ago, Bishmol, that you cannot sell if it's a krachim. The Gemara says, "Who beiknish the zuta have?" It was a very small shul, the inu avdu, and they made it themselves. In other words, even though the shul might be in a major city, but if the shul was a very specific shul and it was only, let's say, for convenience for people who live right in that immediate area, then it's not considered a metro, a shul like a cosmopolitan shul or something, and therefore Rabbi Lazar could do whatever he wants with it. Says the Gemara, who beknish the zut? Sorry, makes us another question that says in Pasuk, when you come to Eretz Yisrael, that I'll give you as an inheritance, and we learn about the laws of leprosy, and it says that I'll give you leprosy, the base Eretz Achuzas, from the house of the land that you will inherit. So we dash from there, only a private home that you inherit, Achuzaschem mitame ben agoyim. Only a private home will be able to become tameh through leprosy, but the ein Yerushalayim mitame ben agoyim. But Yerushalayim does not become tameh through leprosy. Why won't Yerushalayim become leprosy? Because Yerushalayim doesn't belong to any individuals, as we'll soon see. Because we're going to have an argument whether Yerushalayim was divided amongst all the tribes or it belonged to no one individual. I didn't hear Yerushalayim definitely belongs to certain tribes. The only part of Yerushalayim belonged to everybody was that it is the area of the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, that will not attract leprosy, the laws of leprosy. Because by leprosy it has to be Ashaloi Habai is the one who owns the home. Here it belongs to the Eibishter. But Yerushalayim, I believe, will attract leprosy because every person in Yerushalayim, whoever home they owned, and it was theirs. So, but anyway, what do we see from here? Yehuda says that the only place that does not attract leprosy that belongs to the whole world is the Beis Hamikdash itself. Sounds like, but a shul would attract leprosy because it does belong to private owners. So we see, what do you tell me that Yerushalayim was definitely a krach, a metropolis, and yet we see that it has private owners. How about you say about the Metami? Come tell me. Why had the Krach and belongs to the whole world? And the Gemara, interpret doesn't mean Migdash. You thought Migdash means the limit the base of Migdash. Only a holy place. That and a shul is included, and we'll see later in the Gemara in a few days that a shul is actually referred to as a Migdash mat. So therefore, Shmuel is right. A shul of a krach belongs to everybody. Says the Gemara, so what's the crux of the argument? It's based on another argument. Tanakam hold, and his chalkal, as we'll soon see, and his chalkal, Yerushalayim l'shvatim. Nobody owns Yerushalayim, and therefore there's no laws of leprosy there because there's no private ownership. But Yehuda Sava nis chalkal Yerushalayim l'shvatim. Yerushalayim was divided amongst individuals. And what's going on here? We'll look to that tonight. This is actually based on an argument of the following tonight. Time we learned Ma hoya bechalka shel Yehuda. Which region of Eretz Yisrael was in Yehuda's portion? From the Beis Hamikdash, Harabayis, the Temple Mount itself, outside the Beis Hamikdash, Halashachas, the chambers on the side, Va'azoras, and all three courtyards. The Ezras Noshim, the big one, and then you have the Ezra Yisrael, which is the next one, which is 11 amas deep. They're all 132 amas wide, but 11 amas deep, and then the Ezra's Kain, which is 132 amas deep, until you get to the area of the Mizbeach. So which portion was in Binyamin's chelik? Ulam, the Heichel, or Beis Hamikdash, the entire building of the Beis Hamikdash was Binyamin's. And as we'll see the Mizbeach as well, Urutsuya Hoysa Yitzas Mechelkosh. Yehuda had a little bit of a strip. The Nichneses Bechelkoi shall and it entered the portion of Binyamin. Ubom Mizbeach Boni, and the Mizbeach was built in. From our Gemara here, it sounds like the Mizbeach was a Yehuda's portion. Actually, the Mizbeach itself was in Binyamin's portion, but the strip, in other words, the north side of the Mizbeach, which is facing to the right, was Binyamin. The west side, which is the Beis Hamikdash, is Binyamin. The south side, on the left side of the Mizbeach, was Binyamin, but Yehuda had the entire east side of the Mizbeach was Yehuda's. So there was no Yisoidid, there was no base there. And then the strip went also a little bit into the south side, so therefore a little section there also didn't have a base. So that was Yehuda's section. That's all Yehuda had. Well, Binyamin had tzaddik, Binyamin the tzaddik was constantly, it bothered him why he didn't have that area as well. Leboili wanted to absorb it into his territory. It says, he's scratching on it all day long. That was he wanted it. That's when the Binyamin was that he became the host for the Shechina. The Kodesh HaKadoshim was in his section. So what do we see from here? That every part of Yerushalayim was divided amongst people, and therefore the same thing Tzaras exists, in Yerushalayim. The high Tana Saba and the other Tana holds. Ladies, Yerushalayim belongs to nobody in particular. Which Tana is that? And therefore, there's no Tzaras in Yerushalayim which Rabbi Yehuda. Who holds that? The Tana you learned. Ein maskidin batim b'Yerushalayim. You have no right to rent out your houses in Yerushalayim because you don't own it. You have like a life tendency, but you don't own it, so you can't charge anybody rent. It's not theirs. Yerushalayim belongs to everybody. Rashi seems to be saying it's talking about maybe throughout the year you could rent it, but because you maintain it and all that, but just when the pilgrimage happens, the 3 times a year, then you shouldn't rent it because like everyone has a schus then in Yerushalayim, and no one has the right to rent them. Now, not only you can't rent them the room, you can't even rent them the bed, even though the bed belongs to me, but the bed is sitting on the ground that doesn't belong to you. Therefore, so what's the magical thing to do? So a person stays that you can't charge them rent. When they bring their animals as sacrifices, the hide of that animal belongs to the owner. The owner of the animal, they should give that over to their host. Not only that, they can actually demand payment with that in lieu of money. So what do you see from here? That no one owns Yerushalayim, and that's the 2 opinions of Yehuda Rameir. From here we see laws of etiquette. It's actually the right thing to do. If you're staying somewhere as a host, leave them over behind your canteens and leave them over also your hides as a form of a tip for taking care of you. Let's go back. Now this is very important. Now we're going to learn there's a concept called Zayin to the ear. We learned it here. We also learned it in Bava Basra, not in the Gimel Beis, who talks about the shul, but actually in that test over there when it talks about the role of the community. It's a concept called Zayin to the ear, like a board. Now, according to some, it seems Lav Dafka 7. We're talking about an actual board. Lav Dafka 7. Others say no. It has to be the Rashba and others write, the Ritva writes, it has to be 7 people, Dafka 7, to give them the full powers. But it depends. This board, if they are a general board to administrate all the things of the community, then you need 7 people to have that koyach. However, if you appoint a person that your job is to sell the shul, for example, then even your individual, because you're appointed, then you have the full power of a board. But Zayin Tovia generally is an expression when we have a general board. Parnesi would take care of the whole community. Now we're going to learn that when it comes to kfarim and you're allowed to sell the shul, there's a difference if you sell the shul, the people in the shul sell the shul, or the board and the people together sell it. Because when the board and the people sell it together, they have such koyach that the money that they got from the sale of the shul is no longer holy. The shul itself, the kedusha of the shul was transferred to the money, so it's already a step lower. And then that money can be used if the Zayin to the ear and the people that got together, they can do whatever they want with it because they can take the kedusha and away from it. That's the power that they have if they combine. If they only work on their own, either the Zayin to the ear or the people in the city, then the money still remains holy and can only be used for holy things. But when it comes to krachim, it doesn't matter if it's Zayin to the ear and the people in the city. You cannot sell a shul in the krach because the whole world is involved. However, the Magen Ram says if the shul is defunct, it's not being used anymore. That's a different story. Anyway, it's not being used. Then you can sell it for other. Then you can sell it and money no longer created and all that, and for other things as well. Even if you're allowed to sell the shul and the shul lose, so what happens? The kedusha of the shul is no longer a holy place, but you're not allowed to do things there which are insulting, which are embarrassing. But if the zayin, that's if the people in the city sell it. If the zayin to the ear together with the people sell a shul, forget about we're not talking now about the money. We're focusing on the shul itself. Then the shul can be used for anything, perhaps machlekes, maybe even for things which are embarrassing. You can use the shul for whatever you want. So when Zayin to the ear and the people sell together, we said 2 things. The shul itself doesn't have any more kedusha, and because the shul is not a holy place. The shul is like a tashmish for a holy thing. It's not like I say for Torah or Sfarim. But the money as well is no longer holy. They do combine. If they do it on their own, the money is still holy. The shul might not be holy anymore. because the kedusha of the shul was transferred to the money, but the shul itself, you cannot do anything which is degrading, which might be considered insulting to the kedusha of the shul. But if you do it together, zayin to the ear, together with the anshe mayim and mayim kol ear, it's different altogether. And the pasuk already say it doesn't mean they have to have a big meeting and invite the whole city. If the zayin to the ear do it, and nobody in the city protests, it's as if the tantamount to the whole city agreeing with it. It's a tacit approval. So inside, what says Rabbi? That's all of this is talking about. I want to talk about by far you can sell if they weren't all involved together. If they did it combined, then that you can drink, you can take the money, even though the kedusha from the shul was transferred to the money, if they sold it together, then the kedusha of the money also dissipates, and you can even buy with it beer to have a drink. Rabbi Havla will tell you he had a basic connection that was sort of a churban, it was defunct. Also, the Kamer Rashi says, can I go ahead and plant? Machlek is in the Rishonim whether planting is considered a degrading act or just an act that isn't kodesh. He said, go ahead and collect it from the Zion to the ear in front of the ear, and then do whatever you want with it. Then you can plant. So again, the machlekes is if Zora is even a degrading act, that means if the Zion to the ear together with the entire city decide to sell a shul of kfarim, then you can do even degrading acts, which is, for example, land planting. But if you learn that planting is not a degrading act, it's just not kodesh, then all the Zion to the ear and everything else can do is to make sure that they do normal things with it, and they shouldn't sell the shul for an occupation for an activity which should be degrading. Surely not for a church. Second one further, Rabbi was building of a shul. It was an old shul. He wanted to destroy the old shul in order to take the beams from there and the bricks from there into the new shul. He asked the question. We learn about Master. Chizda said, Chizda said, you're not allowed to destroy a shul before you build up the other shul. Now, in the Gemara, there's a machlek, or the Gemara has a question. The reason is because of a scale of negligence. So you're going to break one shul and you never end up building the other shul. Is that the problem? Or the problem is that where are they going to daven in the interim? And the difference is if you have other shuls in the neighborhood. If you have other shuls in the neighborhood, we're not worried we can daven in the interim, but you're still worried you just lost the shul and you have no replacement. So he wanted to know. This Rav Chizda said you shouldn't demolish one shul before you build the other one. Is it mishum pshusa because of negligence? But over here, I'm demolishing in order to take the bricks and beams to build a new shul. There's no negligence. Ki I gave them my. What's in this case? Also, Papa said it's forbidden. The Kame de Rabhuna also is forbidden. Because the fact is that you took away a shul before you built another shul. This shul chilufa v'zvuna, if you, let's say, swapped it for something else or you sold it, then shodi, then it is permitted. But if you're just renting it out for any use you want, because the kedusha left the shul, you transferred it to the money. But if you rented out the shul or mashkoina, you gave it away as a pledge, then also is forbidden. Why? Because the shul is still holy. It's forbidden to do personal things that can only be used as a shul. And one thing I just remember that when we say that a krach, you cannot sell it. You cannot sell the shul, let's say, in a krach, because you need the whole world to agree. But that's only for selling the shul to turn it into nothing. But if you're selling the shul and you bought another shul with that money, what do the people in the world care which shul they're going to daven in? Then there's no issue there at all regarding a krach as well. We're talking about krach, selling the shul and not buying with the money another shul. Selling the shul and turning it into something else, no longer to be used as a shul. My timer big koi, because it still retains its kedusha, still retains holiness. Leaving the nami, same thing with the bricks of a shul chiluf, and if you swapped it for something else, bizvuna, you sold it, so the kedusha of the stones left the stones and went to this money. Shadi permitted. Aizufin, if you lent someone these bricks, also still retains the kedusha, and you cannot do mundane things with it. When we talk about bricks, we're talking about things that was used for a shul and was dismantled. The brand new bricks are set aside to use for a shul, but haven't then done it. It doesn't have to do shul. Less lamba. Even though we're going to have we had a few times in brachas And we'll have in Bobas in Sanhedrin, even when it says Hasmona Milsihi, even the one that says that if you set something aside, it's already considered as if the Kedusha is already on it. You already wove a cloth for a corpse, for a dead body. So therefore, it has mana, just setting it aside makes it kodesh. Here it's so distant. This is the bricks. It's and you set aside the bricks. It's not even the shul yet. So therefore, it's as if you're just spinning the threads, and that everyone agrees is too remote, too far away. It doesn't have any kedusha whatsoever yet. That said it. Matana. What about matana? What about if you gave the shul away as a gift? Let's say the people of the city gave it away, the shul as a gift, and they want to use the shul for something else, no longer for shul, other activities. So the question is, did the kedusha leave the shul? Ask the Gemara. First of all, matana. Please, but there's an argument of Acha and Ravina. Chad Asa v'Chad Shari. One of them says it is forbidden, and one of them says it's permitted. One of them says it's forbidden. Man Asa b'Hai Tipir. One says forbidden. Very simple. The kedusha, the only way that kedusha can leave something is it goes on to something else. It has to be transferred. If you give someone a gift, I receive nothing in replace. I'm just giving you. We're giving you a gift. So where did the kedusha of the shul go to? How was it transferred? So therefore it's forbidden. But a man shadi, the one who permits it, is a very interesting concept, which we'll learn in Gemara Babatzia, all about if matana is considered a sale. Why? How come generally who gives gifts? Who do you give a gift to? You don't give to strangers. You don't even give a gift to people that you know. You only give a gift to people that you feel you owe them a debt or gratitude or whatever it is. So because you received something, you're giving them now a gift. So that's something that you received is where the kedusha is transferred to. If it wouldn't be the fact that I benefited from you, I would never have given you the gift. So therefore, that is where the kedusha is transferred to. That hana that I received, and even though it's a retrospect, you can go further and say the hana I'm getting right now that you accepted the gift. That's where the kedusha is transferred. And in Bamitzvah is actually machlekes is matana is like mecher is a gift like a sale or not. Either how to have a matana is considered like a sale. Tell them we learned. There's two concepts. There's a thing called tashmishe mitzvah, and there's a thing called tashmishe kedusha. And the difference is as follows. Tashmishe mitzvah, I will explain. Tashmishe mitzvah is where something that has been used for a mitzvah, but there's no kedusha there. And there's kedusha like by tefillin, you have the Abish's name there, so that's kedusha, that's holy. And tzitzis, for example, is you're doing it while it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. It's being used for a mitzvah, but there's no intrinsic kedusha there. So it goes as follows: Tashmishe mitzvah, things which are there to support a mitzvah. The zerakin can be tossed away, but in a bakabadik way. So if you throw out your tzitzis, you put it in the bag separate from everything else. Tashmishe kedusha, something which is to support something holy, nignazin. You can't just toss it away. You have to bury it. The Elohein tashmishe mitzvah. What's considered tashmishe mitzvah? Sukkah, the sukkah itself, lulav, shofar, tzitzis. There's no kedusha there, but it's being used as a mitzvah. The Elohein tashmishe kedusha. What's considered kedusha? The luskime sfarim. For example, the cover that you place the sfarim in, or tefillin, or the cover of tefillin or mezuzahs. So all these covers, they're there to support something holy, which has Hashem's name recorded. So that's called Tashmishe Kedusha, and you can't just toss it away. Tik shel Sefer Torah, or Nartik shel Tefillin, again, the zekel, the sack that you put the Sefer Torah in, or the Tefillin in, and those things, order to a saying, and the straps. So here the Gemara says that the straps are Tashmishe Kedusha. This is a big argument in Rashi and Tosfos. When the Gemara says that the Tefillin Shorosh is holy. So Rashi says, because on the tefillin, the bayis has a shin, and then you have, the ritzuas, where you have, what do you call it, the kesher, or the ritzua, you have a daled. So they can see most of Hashem's name. Tosfos says, it's clear from the Gemara here that the daled is not Hashem's name, because there's no kedusha here. It says here that the straps of tefillin are tashmishe kedusha. They themselves are not kodesh. According to Rashi, if the strap is a daled, and the tips of the yud, then the strap is a daled, then there's your kedusha right there. So that's a big argument Rashi takes. Amar Zarava. But first I thought, hi kursaya. First I thought that the bima that we place the Sefer Torah on is tashmish. The tashmish is so remote from kedusha because you have a cover on the bima and then you put a Torah on the cover. So the bima itself does never directly come in contact with the Sefer Torah. So therefore the bima is a tashmish of a tashmish. So really it doesn't have any kedusha of its own. The shadi you can do with it whatever you want. Even the Chazina, I saw the Meisve Aleya Sefer Torah. I saw in our show at least. He says that sometimes they will place the Sefer Torah directly onto the bina. I said, if so, Tashmish Kedusha also. Then this is their support for Kedusha, and it is forbidden. First, I thought that the inner curtain in the Aron Kodesh, they would have a curtain that was inside that was protecting the doors and the Sefer Torah. I would have thought Tashmish, the Tashmish is there to support the doors, and the doors are support Sefer Torah. So the doors are the Aron Kodesh itself is a Tashmish Grusha, and this is a Tashmish of a Tashmish. Kivan the Chazina, I saw that they sometimes take the curtain, the ayayfale, that they fold it up, and they place this far directly on top of the curtain. I then suggested that Tashmish Kedusha also, it itself is the direct Tashmish of Kedusha, and it is forbidden. He says that this Aron Kodesh, the Irfid, that sort of rotted away, they got all room. Me'ev the Teva, Sutrasi, you're allowed to make out of it. You're allowed to make out of a large Aron Kodesh a small Aron Kodesh. And you don't say that it's meridin because it's not a question of size that makes the kedusha. So therefore, it's the same. But kursaya, to take an Aron Kodesh and use the wood to turn it into a bima, that is asa. Because even according to the one that says that from time to time they will put the Sefer Torah directly on the bima, it's only occasionally. Most of the times you have a mappa there, you have a cover there. So therefore, it has less kedusha than an Aron Kodesh. One more says, the bowl, if you have this curtain that rotted away, the mev, the prisa, the sifri, and to make it, so we're talking about, for example, the curtains of the Aron that became rotted away. The mev, the prisa, the sifri, if you want to make it as a curtain for Sfarim, you can. But Chumash is forbidden. Chumashim are called Chumashim, obviously, because Chumash is a fifth. Each sefer of the Torah is a fifth, so it's called Chumashim. But in those days, they would make every sefer of the Torah, let's say Bereshis, on its own, and they would write it on parchment like a sefer Torah, but they only had each Chumash on its own. We'll have a gittin of some of a discussion how we treated Kedusha and so on. So therefore, but it's definitely less Kedusha than a full sefer Torah, and therefore it's forbidden that even the curtain to be used for that. Handy is it really the Chumashim. These covers, let's say, of Chamashim, Ukamatri, the Sifri, and these boxes that you put in the Sefer Torah, Tashmik Lushinu, or Sfarim in, we're talking about Sfarim now, not a full Sefer Torah, but Chamashim with that. And the box that you put them into are considered holy, Vinignozin, and you have to hide them. Says the Gemara Pshita, isn't that obvious? I would have thought, Hani Lav the covered Avidin. I would have thought you didn't, it's not like an Aron Kodesh that's there, covered that Sefer Torah. Either according to Rashi, standing, according to time, they have to be lying down, but which we'll see. There's a whole argument there between them, but it's done for cover of Sefer Torah. Okay, it's Kodesh. Over here, these boxes that you put this farm in into the Balma of it, it's just there to protect it from dust and so on, and it's therefore maybe it has no kedusha. Kamashla does. Ahu Beiknish, there was a shul, the Yudoy Ramai Jews that came from Rome. They came from Rome and they went to Mechuzah and they settled there and they built themselves a shul. So it's called the Roman shul. This shul had a room connected to it where if somebody passed away, they would bring the mace to that room to sit there. People would say till until they buried it. And a kohen is, we know that oil, that tumah spreads if you have a common roof. There was no door that you can close to segregate that room from the rest of the shul. So kohenim had a problem. They couldn't walk into the shul while a mace was there. So what happened was in this Roman shul, it was open to this particular room. That they were placed there, the dead bodies, and the kohenim wanted to daven there. What should they do? They said to Rabbi, this is our issue, what should we do? He suggested to them, Dolu Teva, so take your Aron Kodesh And I swore, place it there right at that entrance when there's a mace in that room. Place the Aron Kodesh there. Always leave the Aron Kodesh there, and the Aron Kodesh will block the tumah. Because the rule is anything which is not mekabel tumah, anything which is not received tumah, blocks the tumah. Now, why won't the Aron Kodesh be mekabel tumah? It's a box and everything else. Because the rule, another rule is any permanent keli, it's not mobile. In order for it to be mekabel tumah, track tumah, it has to be mobile. But this is permanent. It's heavy. It's big. It's large. You put it, you place it. It's going to remain there forever. It's called the ashul enough. It's made there to stay there for a long term. Then it's not makabel tumah. If it's not makabel tumah, it can intercept the tumah. So the keli clays also nachas is meant to put down there permanently. And the rule is clays also nachas. The makabel tumah. Clays is not tumah. It intercepts the tumah. Rabbana said to Rav, but sometimes they move it. Sometimes, and this is very, very interesting. So the Aron Kodesh then must have been not very high, must have been quite low, because it says sometimes they would use the Aron Kodesh as a bima. They would place the Sefer Torah on top of the Aron Kodesh, and it seems that they would move it. They would move it. What do you call it? And so therefore it becomes a portable thing, and it becomes a portable thing. It's a problem. So he said here, he said, so then you have no choice. You can't daven there because it's a portable item. Amazon would have said, the cover is from that ratted. What can you do with it? Remember, he said you have to you can use it to cover a mace with it, but only a mace mitzvah. Remember, the geniza had to be buried anyway, but only a mace mitzvah. We have no family or anything else. Otherwise, you're not allowed to do that. It's a last resort, and that you're allowed to. That rotted away. What do you do with the sefer Torah that rotted away? Remember, it's kodesh. Goins in oisai, so you bury it eitzah Talmud Chacham alongside a Talmud Chacham in the cemetery. Afilu shoyn halachas, even though the Talmud Chacham only knows Shulchan Aruch. And Rashi says never learned Shas, just knows Mishnayos, the basic laws, and never learned Shas. Doesn't matter. It's a lower standard of Talmud Chacham. Nevertheless, Sefer Torah is appropriate to place it there. But also when you bury it, you should put it inside earthenware so it should be for longevity. So it says when a satim, Yirmiyah was told when a satim you should place it in his earthenware. All those contracts of the land that they bought in Eretz Yisrael right before they went to the 70 years exile in Babel, he suggested they should place it in these earthenware so they can last for a long time. We're talking about you have to elevate kedusha a shul. And you want to sell the shul, and with the money you want, but this is not talking about Zion to the ear together in Maimed, because then you can do whatever you want. We're talking about in a traditional forum that you're allowed to sell, and the money is, the shul is no longer holy, but the money is holy. That money can only buy things which are more Kaddish. Interesting. A base Hamedrash is holier than a base HaKnesses. Even though the base HaKnesses you're not allowed to eat, and the base HaMedrash you are allowed to eat, you're allowed to doze off, and the base HaKnesses you're not allowed to, that's because the people live there to learn. They don't even have to daven the base HaMedrash. Even though Limar Bracha is the best place to daven is where you learn. But even if you don't daven the base HaMedrash, a base HaMedrash is considered holier. As the Gemara Shabbos says that learning is Chaye Olam and davening is Chaye Shah. And because the base HaMedrash is holier than the base HaKnesses, therefore, you're allowed, you're allowed to use the money to buy a base HaMedrash. That's what the Papi said in the name of Rava. But if you want to sell a base Hamedrash and turn it into a base HaKnesses, that is forbidden. However, the Papa said the name of Rava just opposite. He said the base HaKnesses is holy than the base Hamedrash. Rabach says, Kavos say that a Papi Mistabra makes much more sense like a Papi, that a base Hamedrash is holier than a base HaKnesses. Even though a base HaKnesses doesn't need a mezuzah, and the base Hamedrash does. You're allowed to convert a basic lesson into a basic medrash. Mami, no, is a good proof. Okay, we'll stop over here.